Hello, I'm Lillian Mills, Interim Dean of the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome to Texas McCombs Presents and the Texas Tribune with host Evan Smith, CEO of the Texas Tribune, and our distinguished McCombs alumnus, Gary Kelly, CEO of Southwest Airlines. Texas McCombs is known for exceptional faculty, groundbreaking business research, future-forward curriculum, and top-ranked academic programs. We research and anticipate changing market needs and prepare our students to be agile leaders in a world we can't yet imagine. Texas McCombs is a shining example of the University of Texas at Austin's promise. What starts here changes the world. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Evan Smith, the CEO of the Texas Tribune, and I want to welcome you to today's virtual event, a conversation with Southwest Airlines CEO Gary Kelly. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. This event is presented in partnership with Texas McCombs and Texas Executive Education. These and other generous Texas Tribune supporters play no role in determining the content, panelists, or line of questioning at our events. We'll be talking today for about 45 minutes, including your pre-submitted questions. I've got a good batch in hand, and I'm looking forward to asking them on your behalf. If you'd like to tweet about our discussion, please use the hashtag #TTEvents. And if you like what you see, don't forget that the start of our biggest event of 2020, the virtual Texas Tribune Festival, is less than 3 weeks away. Tickets are on sale, and the bulk of our program is now live. Go to texastribune.org/festival to sign up today. Okay, let's get on with our show. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guest. Gary Kelly is the CEO and chairman of the board of Southwest Airlines, the nation's largest carrier of originating domestic passengers, and now in its 47th consecutive year of profitability, a record unmatched in the commercial aviation industry, but at risk in this unprecedented moment. An accountant by training, Mr. Kelly is a 34-year veteran of Southwest, where he's held a variety of titles, including controller, CFO, executive vice president, and president. A native of San Antonio, he's a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin. Mr. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us. Good to be with you.
Evan, it's great to be with you, and thanks for having us.
Sure thing. I thought, Mr. Kelly, I'd start out by asking you to talk about Southwest's response to the public health emergency, how it's changed the way you do business, and deal with and serve the likes of me. As I've told you, I'm a frequent traveler. Before all this, I was flying 3 to 4 times a month, far and away most often on Southwest. I have not flown since March 5th, and I have no plans or intentions to fly anytime soon. I'll confess to having trepidations, and I know I'm not the only one. Bottom line is, I have no firsthand experience of what it's like to fly now. Tell me, what's it like to fly now?
Well, Evan, again, thanks for having us, and thanks for starting there. That's, the safety of our people and our customers, the health of our people and customers is our top priority. Yeah. And obviously, this is a scenario that our country arguably hasn't seen in a century. So it comes as quite a shock to all of us. But, yeah. I think the first challenge that we faced going back to March was just getting enough personal protective equipment, quite frankly. So there was a scramble for that in terms of just getting needed supplies through the supply chain. Yeah. And then working with the CDC to try to figure out what protocols make sense. So we're long past that at this point. By the time we got to May 1st, we had really settled in with what we wanted to do. At that point, we published our Southwest Promise. Mm-hmm. So it is a layered approach to providing a very safe and healthy environment. And we will welcome you back. I fly a lot, and right now it's a very good experience. We get really, really good feedback from our customers. But fundamentally, when you walk in the door at the airport, The airport has a much deeper and more frequent cleaning protocol that's in place, and generally the airport is responsible for that. When you interface with our customer service employees, you'll see plexiglass shields, and we try to make for as much of a touchless experience as possible. In terms of check-in, boarding passes, and those kinds of things.
Which, of course, Mr. Kelly, you were doing before. I mean, one of the good things about having to be in a touchless world is you actually have experience at making this mostly touchless, if you chose to put it that way, pre-pandemic, right?
That was pretty much in place. You're right. We were well prepared in that sense. So I think just the cleaning of the airport, the cleaning of the airplane is a very significant enhancement since the pandemic. We're also physically distancing in the boarding process. So as you know us well, we normally group 30 people at a time. Now it's 10.
Yeah.
And we're not booking the middle seats on the airplane, so it allows for at least some distancing on board. Everyone is required to wear a mask. We do deep cleanings of the airplane every single day. I think the most important thing to know is that the air in the cabin of the airplane is circulated every 2 to 3 minutes with fresh air externally. And in addition to that, there's hospital quality air filters. They're known as Hepa air filters.
Right.
And that will capture 99.97% of particles and pathogens. So there's no evidence that the virus has been transmitted on board an airplane. Admittedly, no one really knows, but I think we feel that it's a very, very safe environment, and again, we get very good feedback from our customers.
So the 2 to 3 minutes of fresh air circulating, is that a change from before?
It is not, and that has been in place for many, many years, and it's not just our equipment. I think that that's standard for airplanes around the world.
Right. So that's standard. The Hepa filtering, I think, was also pre-pandemic, right? You had that stuff in place as well. To me, the big difference was that, as I understand it, the EPA approved hospital-grade disinfectant that's being used to clean the planes throughout. And the jetway was previously being used, I believe, only on the lavatories. Is that right? So you've actually stepped up the use of that hospital-grade disinfectant? Is that true?
Yeah, really the change is the cleaning protocol, adding the plexiglass, boarding in smaller groups, and not booking the airplane full, and then also requiring the face coverings.
Let me ask you this. So you are requiring face coverings, have to wear masks on the plane. And if somebody comes to the plane and says, I don't want to wear a mask, liberty, personal choice, as you know, we're having a nationwide, very politicized discussion about whether wearing masks is a good thing. Your response is to turn people away. If they show up at the plane or at the gate without a mask, you turn them away.
Yeah, they must wear a mask. And if they get on board the airplane, they have a mask, they get on board and they don't wear the mask, we'll return to the gate and they'll get off the airplane. So, you know, you just can't have it both ways. And that's what the CDC recommendations are. Right. And we're following those strictly. And the vast majority of people want others and themselves to be wearing masks. I think that's pretty widely accepted, although there's always exceptions.
Right. Is it also true that you have limited the service on the plane, food and beverage service, to flights beyond a certain number of miles to limit the instances in which people would feel compelled to take their masks off to eat or drink?
That was absolutely the case for roughly the first 60 days, so say March and April. At this point, we're offering water. So we do have our flight attendants walking down the aisle with cans and cups. But we're not selling cocktails or offering sodas at this point to minimize, again, the interaction and the contact.
This weekend, Mr. Kelly, I heard your counterpart at Frontier Airlines say on National Public Radio that Frontier was the only U.S. airline to mandate temperature checks for all passengers. Why are you not doing that?
Well, I'm a huge proponent of doing the temperature check. It is true that we're not doing that yet. We have a prototype underway with the TSA at Dallas Love Field and the Dallas airport. So what we're advocating is that the TSA, since they're screening all customers, they add that to their protocol. They're screening in the first place, so screening for temperature, I think, would be a logical addition to their their duties. The issue with us trying to do it is every airport is different, and it puts the customer in an awkward position if they've gone all the way through the airport and now they're at the boarding gate to try to then deny them boarding. I don't think is a very good customer experience. So rather than implement that as a temporary procedure, we would much rather focus working with the federal government to have it in place where it really belongs, which is at the security checkpoint.
Well, the fact is, if I'm looking to get over my trepidations about flying, I would actually prefer not to have people wandering through the airport who may get to the gate and find out they have a fever, right? I'd rather they be checked at the curb, for goodness sake, right? I mean, there's a logic to that beyond the customer experience. So, Mr. Kelly, would you put your grandchildren or your kids on a plane today?
I would, and I have. And again, I think the Southwest flight experience today is really, really good. Very strong on-time performance. Our people are doing a wonderful job of providing hospitality. I've described the health approach that we've taken. So absolutely, I believe it's a very safe environment. I think it's safer than a lot of restaurants and shops that you go in today, just because of the enhanced cleaning that we do, as well as the filtering system on the airplane.
You called out the CDC's guidelines as being helpful to you in terms of thinking about how to do this. I want to ask you whether you're worried about the politics of the CDC at the moment. This is the same CDC that a few weeks ago released recommendations for going back to school, and then the president complained about them being too tough. And then the CDC came back and loosened them and revised them. Is the CDC who we should be trusting on this, Mr. Kelly?
Well, I think we have to trust that the CDC is doing what they believe is best. And I think we also have to understand that this is the first time in a century that we've had this kind of a challenge.
Right.
And we already know over the past 6 months that the CDC has evolved their thinking. At first, masks, as an example, as we all know, weren't required. So I like the transparency. I like the fact that people are willing to continue to take in information and update their best judgments. We, talking about the University of Texas system, we've consulted with University of Texas Southwestern here in Dallas.
Right.
And so we have a way to corroborate what the CDC's recommendations are and spend a lot of time on that. So politics is inevitable, and that's a world that we live in. But overall, we have faith in the CDC guidelines, and that is our guidepost.
In the CDC's own public health guidelines, it says the following, quote, air travel requires spending time in security lines and airport terminals, which can bring you in close contact with other people. You talked about TSA. The reality is, Mr. Kelly, even if you and Southwest do everything right, even if you do your piece right, one of the challenges here is there are pieces you don't control. You don't control how the TSA operates, and you don't control how the airport authorities operate their facilities. So really, you can't do everything, right?
Well, that's true, but we do collaborate, and at least with respect to, the points that you're making, airports and the TSA, I haven't found anyone who doesn't agree with the philosophy or the basic protocols that we're talking about. TSA provides for physical distancing. I think where the challenge is individual citizens and whether they will comply. And so what we need to be doing right now is really basic. We just need everyone to comply.
Yeah.
So physically distance, wear your mask, wash your hands. Those are the three things that everybody can do.
Yeah.
And in the end, an airport or the TSA or the airline can't make everyone at every point in time do those three things.
Of course, government can make them do that, but as you say, there's politics and everything, right? That's the conversation we're having out in the world, whether government chooses.
They can make them, but they may choose not to comply. So there's then an enforcement question, and so in the end, it's best if everyone simply complies.
Let's come back to government here in a little while, but I want to talk about the financials. I mentioned that you're an accountant by training. You're a CPA, and in fact, that was your job prior to coming to Southwest 34 years ago at another firm. You understand the financials better than some CEOs. I remember long ago interviewing Gordon Bethune, who was the CEO of Continental Airlines, and he had been a mechanic. That was the route that he came up through the airline. You were on the finance side. So when we're talking about financials, this is actually your wheelhouse. You know this stuff. I went back and looked at the transcript of your second quarter earnings call some weeks back. Your revenue in the second quarter of 2020 was down 83% year over year, a record quarterly loss. Is that right?
That is correct, and thanks for reminding me.
Well, we tell you the news when the news is good, and we tell you the news when the news is bad. I alluded to in my introduction the fact that you're, in fact, said outright in my introduction that Southwest has enjoyed 47 consecutive years of profitability, but that you're at risk of breaking that record this year. From your vantage point here on August the 12th, do you think you're going to break that record this year and not be profitable based on what you know?
Oh, I think we will. I can't imagine that things will turn around that quickly. If you go back to March, we were all, it was a guess. We were all hoping that by the fall, the virus might run its course, maybe have some seasonality to it like the flu does. And obviously that's proven to be dead wrong. So if anything, it's worse today than it was back in March by far. So as long as the case counts are high, I think that we have to expect that travel will be relatively modest. So we're continuing to see traffic and revenues down 75% versus a year ago today.
Right.
And to think that that would recover to the point where we would be profitable, I just think is unrealistic.
Yeah. I was looking at your stock price this morning also. Of course, Southwest is a publicly traded company. Stock price this morning was just over $35. I think the market is up today, so it may have ticked up a little bit. But the 52-week high was nearly $59. Now, it had been down all the way to $22.50. Like the oil and gas industry, you're better off than you were a few months ago, but not better enough. I read back in June that you were burning through about $20 million per day in expenses. Is that right? And you've cut that. At least you've seen some expense savings, haven't you?
We would have expected, just to start with revenues for the year, to spend or to earn maybe $23 billion in revenue. So out of our $20 billion in expenses, we've cut about $7 billion. So we've cut a significant amount out of our plan.
That's a third of your expense.
We're still, as you said, Evan, we're still definitely losing cash every single day. And working as hard as we can to figure out how we can stop that bleeding. But it's, 20 million a day is a good rule of thumb.
I read in June that you had enough cash in the bank for 2 years. That's still about right?
That's still about right, probably a longer period than that. And that's, again, based on today's burn rates. And as time goes by, I would expect things to continue to improve so that we continue to mitigate that cash burn. But we've got a long way to go before we can feel like we're out of intensive care.
I want to ask you about a couple of aspects of your business. It's almost like a game show speed round here, although we're not at the end, because I want to understand a little bit about how this business has contracted. What percentage of your fleet of planes is out of commission right now, grounded?
We have a fleet, call it, of 750 737s. At our peak back in April, May, we probably had 400 on the ground. And today it's more around 100 aircraft. But it's a little misleading because the duty day or the usage of an airplane is well below what one would expect. So it just helps for us to keep airplanes moving as opposed to sitting. And so, but I think in terms of an effective utilization, what you can absolutely assume that hundreds of airplanes are being idled at this point, although it's literally just 100.
What percentage of your flight schedule is down? What percentage of your flights are not operating today versus what they would have been at peak pre-pandemic?
Well, a couple of thoughts there. We have, a handful of international markets, so we're not serving those today. We've just added back Cancun and Cabo here recently. But except for that, we're operating to all of our service points before the pandemic. And the reason is, again, CDC was recommending no international travel, and some of the international destinations in the Caribbean, as an example, prohibited U.S. service.
They don't want us right now, right?
They don't want us right now.
You can't control.
So our passenger demand is down about 75%. Our schedule, the number of flights, is generally down in the 35 to 40% range. So there's a gap there. So the airplanes are less full as a consequence. As you know, we're not booking the middle seat, as I mentioned.
Right.
But you know, there's opportunities for us to fly less and maybe save a few bucks. Yeah. But at a point, we just don't. You know, just thinking about you in Austin, while we have fewer flights, we do still have itineraries. So we're trying to maintain the integrity of our network. So when you're ready to fly, if you need to get to Portland or you need to get to Boston, there is a way for you to do that. If we shrink our network too much, then we eliminate those possibilities, and actually, obviously it hurts our communities and our customers, but it's probably not optimal in terms of us managing our P&L either.
Yeah. You said 75% of your passenger load is off. Is that right? 75%?
Yes.
Yeah.
75% less than a year ago.
A year ago. I was doing the math on the loss of the middle seats. You know, it's like I mean, even an idiot like me can do simple math. Middle seats, you're losing 1/3 of the passengers on a given plane just on the basis of those middle seats, right? But it's more than that.
You know, so there's a balance that we strike right now. Again, because the demand is so far reduced from a year ago, it's unlikely that we would fill many flights anyway. That's not why that's not why we've adopted the policy.
Right.
But when we actually try to look at the, you know, pluses and minuses of not booking the middle seat, I don't think it's really costing us that much. Our overall load factor right now is not 67%.
Yeah,
it's below that. It's around 40%. So there's available seats anyway, but it's the right thing to do to ensure that we are offering a safe product, and also to instill confidence in our customers that they're going to have a pleasant flight experience. And so again, that's the feedback we're getting.
You initially had eliminated the middle seat booking through, I think, September, and then you extended it to October 31st, if I'm remembering correctly. Are you thinking about extending it beyond that?
I am. I think it'll be a rolling decision, and our decision to extend it beyond September was simply correlated to the spike in COVID-19 positives that we were seeing.
Right.
We're not continuing to grow in the country, but we haven't bent the curve back down. So I think as long as we have that kind of a concern, we'll need to keep the middle seats open.
Yeah. Have you cut your prices on flights? My favorite thing to do at night when I'm on Twitter is to read to my wife these tweets about $70 round trip from Austin to Los Angeles, although, of course, we're never going to do it. But it seems to me like the airline prices have all come down. And, of course, if we're talking about the financials, that's got to hurt as well. Cut the prices to get passengers to fly, but still you're making less money.
It's definitely a low-fare environment. All the airlines, whether they like it or not, they're low-fare carriers now. I've already expressed my opinion months ago that it will be a brutal fare environment. We're a low-cost airline, so we're actually built for this. It's we're not so low cost that we're profitable at these levels, but absolutely, if you want to fly, we got some really good deals for you out there.
Yeah. And I want to ask you last about workforce, Mr. Kelly. In your bio, on the Southwest website, it says the following thing. Gary's biggest source of pride is the fact that Southwest Airlines has never had a single layoff in the airline's 48-year history. That is still true, right? You've had people separate from the company, but not in an involuntary way.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah. I read that your voluntary separation or extended leave opportunity during this pandemic, 28% of the airline's total workforce took you up on it, roughly 17,000 employees. Is that right?
That is correct.
About 4,400 took voluntary separation packages, and about 12,500 signed up for either 6, 12, or 18-month leave packages. So again, those are not layoffs. Those are not furloughs. Those are voluntary decisions on the part of your employees. Had people not taken that opportunity, would you have had to pull the trigger on layoffs?
Oh, I think that would have made the decision a lot harder here. So as you know, I promised our people that we won't have a furlough at least through the end of this year.
Yeah.
And the CARES Act provided for a commitment by the airlines for those who took the assistance the payroll assistants to commit to no furloughs through September 30th. Virtually all of our competitors have put out furlough notices for October 1 as a consequence of that.
But you have not.
Yeah, we have not, and you're exactly right. I think it's almost 30% of our employees will be separating for the company either permanently or temporarily, and certainly that provides some cushion for us here going into the fourth quarter. It makes it easier for us. This is a game of trying to manage through this.
Yep.
Because we're in a trough, and I firmly believe that things will get back to normal. It will get better and back to normal. The question is when. And we don't want to downsize our company so radically that we can't then recover. And you think of all the investments that we've made. What we need, the solution here is to get our passengers back, not to try to shrink the airline so radically that we're prepared for a very, very modest travel environment.
Let me go back to that second quarter earnings call. This is something you said. We were very well prepared for this. We're prepared for a prolonged war against this pandemic. What does that mean that you were prepared for this? None of us feels like this pandemic is anything like we could have predicted, have ever lived through before. How do you prepare for this? How were you prepared for this?
Well, I think one of the greatest strengths of Southwest over a long period of time has been our preparedness, and it's for the unexpected, whether it was 9/11 or the Great Recession or the Gulf War going back into the 90s or now this. This is by far the worst, by far the worst. But what I mean by that is we had a lot of cash in the bank. We had a fully available line of credit. We had the lowest debt to total capital in our history coming into this. We had a very strong operation, very strong connection with our people and with our customers. So it was just a really healthy company.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have to go to the hospital, you would rather, be a healthy patient who suddenly gets ill as opposed to someone who is unhealthy. So it's a very healthy company and very resilient. Our people are really, really hardworking. They persevere. And this is like a siege. We're going to have to fight our way through this. It won't be over quickly.
Yep.
I don't know exactly what sacrifices we may be forced to make, but I'm very confident in our people that they're strong and that they have the fortitude to fight through this.
What about the culture of Southwest? One of the distinguishing features of this company, going back to the founding, has been that the culture of this business has been not just unlike any other airline, but really like almost any other business I can think of. Singing at the gate, jokes on the plane by the flight attendants, Herb Kelleher dressed as Elvis Presley, There's nothing fun about the moment we're in. How do you as a CEO, as a leader, maintain what has been the cultural through line of Southwest at a moment like this?
Well, I think companies are important, and I think that's the challenge of the moment is to not lose these great institutions with these great cultures. And we have a very rich history, and we've got so much to look forward to in our future once we get past this. But you were asking about my pride in having no layoffs. Well, this is a family. And the people that are here built this company. They made it the great place that it is. And they are, just as you have described, they're engaged, they care. They work really hard to take care of each other and to take care of our customers. They're very proud of what we've accomplished. It's like a championship team.
Yeah.
And so there's every reason to fight, for our survival here. But with our preparedness, with the culture, there's every reason to be hopeful, and we're just going to have to hunker down and do whatever it takes to get through this. And that is what this culture. That's a huge part of what this culture is our people have proven that they will do whatever it takes. You mentioned twice that we've been profitable for 47 consecutive years, and you also mentioned that no one comes close to that. No one comes close to that.
Yeah.
I'll just repeat again. And the other thing that is remarkable is if you go back to, let's just pick the year that I started in 1986, every major airline that was in existence then, and we were small, we had 60 airplanes, every major airline is either gone or gone bankrupt. Every single one.
Right.
So you make that contrast, and it is remarkable what our people have built here. And yeah, the culture is very important and something that we're going to work really hard to make sure that we retain that. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I've got questions from people in the audience who submitted them in advance of this conversation. I want to get to those in a couple of minutes, but I want to ask you two questions on the government piece of this, if you don't mind, because we've alluded to pieces of this in earlier parts of our conversation. So you mentioned the CARES Act. As part of the CARES Act earlier this year, U.S. airlines received $25 billion in financial support to continue to pay employees even as travel demand dropped, in return for which the airlines were prohibited from doing layoffs or furloughs, I think you said through September 30th. Right? Is that true? How much money how much of that $25 billion did Southwest get from the government?
We got $3.2 billion out of that, and we will have received all of those funds this quarter.
Now that money runs out again. It runs out through
this quarter.
This quarter.
Right.
On July 31st, you joined the union in asking for an extension. Basically, you said we want another 6 months of support from the federal government. You think that's possible? Does it look like that's going to happen? And what are the consequences for Southwest if it doesn't?
I think based on conversations I've had with members of Congress, based on letters that the Senate has sent to Leader McConnell, in support of this, I absolutely think that it's possible. If you go back to March, the whole idea was to sustain air service in the United States. Again, with our business down 75 to 80%, that means that we would have not needed 50,000 employees, 45,000 employees. So you're just talking about enormous job losses that would simply go on the unemployment rolls.
Right.
Not to mention the human toll and chaos of that. And that I think the federal leadership was trying to avoid that, thinking that we would recover pretty quickly. So the guess was by the fall, stability will return, and therefore let's have a commitment through September the 30th. That's proven to be unrealistic, and I think we'll be well into 2021 before things begin to stabilize. So it's really just a matter of saying we put $25 billion into this. We have maintained air service. We have maintained these jobs. If we don't continue it, everything that we paid for here, we're going to lose on October 1st. Because most of the industry will be laying off people and reducing service. So, yeah, we're supportive of our union efforts, and I think there is very good support in Congress and the administration to do this.
You have confidence, based on what you're seeing, that Congress can get this done? It looks to me like Congress couldn't find a bag of peanuts in an airplane galley at the moment.
That's a different question, and obviously, I'm no more privy than anyone else on that. I think that everyone recognizes the challenge before the country, and I think that we would be in a depression today were it not for the swift action of the federal government back in the spring. So I got to believe that it'll happen, and there's just a lot of sausage making, obviously, underway that we just don't have visibility to. But the country needs it, and I think every federal leader knows that.
Yeah. We talked earlier, finally, Mr. Kelly, about the mask mandate and the idea that there are personal choices that people make that ultimately tell you and tell me, can we get out of this? If everybody does their part, maybe we can get through this. I want to ask you if you think the government has done enough. Has the government focused enough on the public health aspect of this conversation? Have the requirements been stringent enough? You said on CNBC in late July, quote, "I just don't think it should be only for air travel. Let's mandate masks. You have to wear pants. Why can't we mandate that you have to wear a mask in a pandemic?" You make a good point. There aren't a bunch of pantsless people walking around in the world. And so my question to you is, has the government done enough to require masks and to mandate the kind of behavior that puts us back, according to the public health authorities, on track?
You know, the challenge is immense. So I think we all recognize that. I don't know that we were as well prepared as a world and a country, you know, for this pandemic as we would have liked. So I got to believe that there will be significant learnings from this in terms of preparedness the next time around. And I think that that includes, you know, what you're talking about. I think the federal government's done a lot. I think as a leader, I always feel like I could have always done more. I'm never totally satisfied with my performance, and I would certainly make that statement here for the federal government as well as just the interaction with the states. But, you know, I think now we just simplify this, and well, what are we talking about? We need to have people, we need mandates to wear the mask.
Yep.
We need that. And
have you communicated that to state leaders or to federal leaders? Because right now, you know, the state has a mask mandate in place. Governor Abbott is stuck between being told he's not doing enough and being called a tyrant, right? At the federal level, we still are not living in a world in which the federal government has mandated masks. So my question is, have you communicated to those people that you believe that we ought to be mandating masks? Let's get on with it.
Absolutely, and I think then what that translates to is the CDC produces its recommendations and then leaves it up to the states to sort of local control. So I'm loath to criticize, you know, whether the federal government should then have a federal order. I just, it's sort of above my pay grade. But in any event, what we're left with in our country is a patchwork, and there's an independent spirit, of course, as Americans as well, which I know we all respect.
Right.
But in this particular case, I feel very strongly that I need to wear the mask, not just to protect myself, but to protect others.
Other people.
And that's where I feel very strongly that no, this needs to be a mandate. And if you want to do these things, go out of your house, you ought to be required to wear a mask.
Right.
We've got to do everything that we can to crush this pandemic. And until we do, we're all going to suffer. So it seems very common sense to me.
Okay.
And I do have pants on, by the way, Evan. So
that falls into the TMI bucket, Mr. Kelly. I'm going to go to audience questions, if you don't mind, with that graceless transition by me. We've got a handful of questions that have come in over the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to go ahead and ask those one at a time. From Bob. My 13-year-old son wants to be a flight attendant for Southwest and has even visited the training center in Dallas. Where will the industry be in 5 years, and what should he focus on for education and experience?
Well, we would welcome to have him as a candidate and look forward to the point in the future where we are hiring again. Right now, we've got a freeze on hiring, as I'm sure you know, because we're actually trying to downsize the company here with our early retirement program. 5 years, I think, is a decent period of time to expect that the world can recover. I think it's predicated on us having a vaccine and bringing this pandemic under control. And then we need to learn our lessons here and make sure that we don't have a recurrence either of this virus or something else. And, you know, the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919 was followed by the Roaring '20s. So we're a much stronger country today and have much better health care today than we did a century ago. So there's every reason to believe we can put a man on the moon 50 years ago. We can defeat this virus. So 5 years from now, we'll be hiring, and we will look forward to having this young man as a flight attendant. So, yeah, we're looking for people who are inspired to serve others and want to be a part of a great family and cause that we call Southwest Airlines. So we look forward to that.
Good. On the workforce question, you talked about, you know, you have a hiring freeze on right now. Anik asks, So many commercial pilots have lost their jobs. This is a drastic change in the industry because there used to be a shortage not so long ago. What can be done to empower all of this talent so the cycles of employment are more balanced?
Oh, wow. That's a hard one. As soon as we started hearing reports of pilot shortages, we also heard reports of mechanic shortages, by the way,
right.
Aircraft mechanic shortages. And that made me wonder, I wonder if we're at the top of the cycle here, because it is a very cyclical world. And then those cycles significantly impact the airline business. It's very high fixed cost. We're very energy dependent. It's very heavily regulated. And it's brutally competitive. So there's just, it's a pretty wicked mix of risk to try to manage. I, for one, don't believe that you can eliminate those risks. And that goes back to my point about trying to be prepared. You've got to have low cost. You need to have great people. You need to offer a great product and manage those finances conservatively. Have plenty of cash in the bank. And don't overextend yourself in terms of debt or commitments. And that's exactly what we've done. Yeah. And it's worked very well for near 50 years.
Beverly asks, how are you approaching strategic planning for the medium to long term given the current environment? That's a great question, because you probably had a whole bunch of plans, as we all did who run businesses, for this year back in January and February. And then, of course, the apple cart overturned. And so those plans are no longer valid.
Evan, that is a great question, and it's just, again, we have to take advantage of what is presented to us, so it's a great opportunity to learn. The first thing that we did back in April is we convened a group. It's being led by our president, Tom Nealon, to review our strategy, review our basic business model.
Yeah.
And what we concluded is that we don't need to change a thing, that we're very well suited for the current environment.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about, Evan, is the fact that, we've got a mix of business travelers and people traveling on their own nickel. Yeah. Well, business travel has been crushed. Totally. And I think that it will be very modest for a long time, which means we'll be relying more on consumers. Well, we're a low-cost airline. We've got a low-fare brand. We don't charge for bags. All of that fits very well. So we like our business model, if you will, and our brand that we have going forward. In terms of our strategy, I would say then we need a short to medium term strategy, which is we need to lose the least amount of money possible. Some airlines around the world literally stopped flying.
Yep.
Because it costs you money, obviously, to burn fuel and pay people every time you take off with an empty airplane. That's foolish. So we're still working on trying to optimize, how many flights should we have? How many customers should we expect? Because it's such a radical change.
Yep.
It is pure guesswork at this point. But relative to our peers, I feel like we've done a really good job of managing through that. But that $20 million that we're losing today, we need to have a plan to get that down to zero as soon as we can. And it looks like it will take us at least into the first quarter of next year to do that.
You make a good point about business travel. I mean, here we are sitting at me in my house and you in either your office or wherever you are. And we're conducting this conversation very pleasantly and without much effort, although there are a lot of people behind the scenes doing the work, on Zoom or on some sort of on Skype, on a platform. The fact is we've figured out in the last 5 months that we can conduct business this way. And I do wonder if ultimately when we come back to something approaching normal, if we're all going to think we don't need to travel as much for business simply because we discovered in this time frame that we can do it this way, and that's bad for the airlines, isn't it?
People want to travel, just to sort of get to the end at the beginning here, but I don't think there's any question that we've all learned a lot. And I am at the office, and we do have a handful of folks here, but I just marvel at the technology, what we have been able to do. We've got 2% of our people working from the headquarters physically. They're all working from home, and companies across the country and across the world
how
are
long
doing
are you
this.
work from home, Mr. Kelly, by the way? What is the Southwest on that?
Right now, our policy is in the building. We have floors that are shut down here, so you can't come into the building. It's at least through the end of this year. But to get back to your question, I don't think that there's any question that we've learned things, that we can use technology. It will impact business travel, but in my 34 years at the company, it has been a technological revolution. And all of those things impacted business travel.
Yep.
And so we still, in 2019, had all-time record business travelers. So I do think people want to travel for business. There's reasons to do that. There's business travelers out there traveling today. Yeah. And it will get back to 2019 levels. But I'll bet you it won't be for 5 to 10 years. And as you know, even in a normal recession,
right,
travel gets cut very deeply by business because business is very disciplined, and it can do that more disciplined than consumers are.
Well, it's a big expense.
And it's a very gradual recovery over a long period of time. And so I think we'd be foolish to expect that it's going to snap right back. I think it's going to take years, and then it's going to be plus on top of that. But commercial real estate, I mean, there's a number of questions that you now can imagine about, what happens in the future, and it's going to be different. There's no question about it.
How long did it take you to get back to normal after 9/11, Mr. Kelly?
I was chief financial officer. In fact, I was executive vice president at that point in time. So I've been with the company a long time, and I was really worried. We were shut down for 3 days. And as it turned out, so that's September 11th, end of the quarter is September the 30th. No one is flying over those ensuing couple of weeks. We made money in the fourth quarter of 2001.
Amazing.
So short answer is, it didn't take very long. I think people were gradually adjusting to the new security protocols at the airports, but people wanted to fly, and we were profitable. The rest of the industry, as you recall, went bankrupt.
Right.
We were profitable. So that's just the magic of having low cost and low fares. So we'll be very well suited for the future environment here. We just need to make sure that we keep ourselves healthy and get back to a positive cash flow here.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, we're out of time. What a wonderful opportunity to talk to you and to learn more about what you're doing there. Greatly appreciate your joining us. Thank you so much.
You bet, Evan.
And to everybody out in there in the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. That is our time. I want to thank again Gary Kelly for joining us, and thanks to Texas McCombs and the Texas Executive Education folks for supporting today's event. If you'd like to support events like this one in the future, become a Texas Tribune member and make our public service journalism possible. Go to texastribune.org/join. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.